Moderating our first panel, Portraits of Zionist Women of Color, is Tabby Refael. Tabby is an award-winning weekly editorial columnist for the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles, where readers rely on her to address topics related to Iran, Israel, Jewish identity, women's rights, and Mizrahi advocacy. Born in Iran after the Islamic Revolution, Tabby fled the country with her family and was granted refugee asylum in the US in the 1990s. She's also a child survivor of the Iran-Iraq War. In Los Angeles, Tabby served as executive director and co-founder of 30 Years After, the nation's only civic action organization for Iranian American Jews. She has served as director of academic affairs for the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles and as director of campus affairs North America for Stand With Us. Take it away, Tabby.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I hope everyone can hear me. And thank you for your forgiveness of my background. This was really the best view of LA that I could download on my computer, unless you wanted a tacky image of the Hollywood sign or something of the beach. But we're going to be speaking about pretty important and heavy things today, and I thought neither one of those would do. It means a lot to me to be here with you, not only with our amazing panelists, but just for me on a personal level. It means a lot to my family that I'm here with you. And before I introduce the panelists, as Stephanie said in her introduction of me, I was born in Tehran after the revolution in the 1980s. And I will tell you that if you had told me as a little girl in my forced mandatory hijab or Islamic head covering, while I was standing in school being forced to chant death to Israel and death to America every day, and while I was running for my life from Iraqi missiles during the Iran-Iraq War, that if you had told me that not only one day would my family have escaped Iran and we would have been the first generation in 2,700 years of our family lineage of the Jewish community there to have done so, but that one day I would really speak on panels with Zionists and with women, right? Two of the biggest enemies of my former homeland, I really would have said that that's absolutely impossible. I don't take this moment for granted. And I can tell you that if I was back in my homeland right now doing this kind of Zoom, I would be putting my life at risk. So we should always stop and remember how amazing and how free it is that we can do these kinds of programs from the safety and freedom of the West. It's a very heavy and very hard time to be an Iranian Jew for me and my community. There's a unique shame and helplessness in knowing that your former homeland helped Hamas plan the October 7th attacks, and now, as the Wall Street Journal reported, helped train Hamas in Iran for those attacks. There's an ambivalence, you know, where you grew up from, where you thought like every ancestor you had, you would be born there, live there, and die there. And here you are now in America. With every headline that we read about Iran doing more activity against Israel and helping Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, with every headline that we read about the US deploying more warships and sending more, you know, weapons and everything that we need to that part of the world, between every story of Iran, Israel, and the US is my community of Iranian Jews, and our hearts are broken and they won't be mended anytime soon. In fact, when we look for healing, we find none of it, because in addition to knowing that in our lifetimes, the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust occurred, now we're completely on edge with fear and helplessness and worry over Israel and Iran, over Iran and the US and the three of them. So that's where I am today. And that's why I'm obsessively reading all of the stories and headlines related to that. And that's where, if there is a person, an Iranian Jewish person in your life or in your community, have them in mind for that. Speak with them, engage with them, ask them how they feel about that. Moving aside, again, thank you, Stephanie, for that warm welcome. I really consider it an honor to introduce these next two amazing women to you. Amy Albertson and Leah Soibel. Amy is a Jewish advocate and educator from California. Through online activism, public speaking, and workshops, Amy empowers young Jews to be unapologetically Jewish. Amy has been active in the Jewish community for over 10 years, starting as president of Hillel at Portland State University. In 2015, she made Aliyah, and she dedicated herself to working for Jewish nonprofits. Amy has been published in the Times of Israel and in my paper, the Jewish Journal of Greater Los Angeles. And she created the, quote, Asian Israeli, cataloging her experiences as a Chinese American Jewish woman. Leah Soibel, a Hispanic American and Israeli, has spent over 15 years working in Israel, the US, and Latin America, empowering thousands of global Latino journalists and media influencers. In 2020, she founded Fuente Latina, which ensures accuracy in Spanish language reporting on Israel, the Jewish world, and the Middle East, irrespective of location. Fuente Latina has brought 350 journalists to Israel, facilitated 65,000 accurate stories, keyword here being accurate, and its work has resulted in 2 Emmy Awards. Both Amy and Leah were named in May to Hadassah's inaugural list of 18 American Zionist women you should know. I was also part of that list. That was a big, proud moment in my life. Now, I want to start this panel discussion off by asking you, Amy and Leah, the first question, which is, through which lens did you view the world a month ago versus how you view the world today? Zionist, Jewish, a person of color, whatever it may be. So please, whoever would like to start, take it away.
Amy, would you like me to go first?
I can start, sure. Thank you, Tabby, for your introduction. So that's a really interesting question, and it's something that's actually been discussed in some of the Asian Jewish communities that I'm a part of. And for me, when October 7th happened, I automatically went into what I think a lot of us have from intergenerational trauma, and also just existing in this world where anti-Semitism is very alive and well and rising, and that was like my Jewish protective mode, and it actually was expressed really well to me from a follower of mine on Instagram. And so these are her words, not mine, but she was talking about it in the context of her as being a woman and a feminist, and that sure, every day I am fighting for equality for women, and I'm concerned for women's safety and these kinds of things, but right now as a Jew, I'm facing an existential crisis, right? It's not just the regular fear of being called a bad nickname as a Jew. It's existential for us, right? So if Israel wasn't protecting us from Hamas in Israel, Israel wouldn't be existing right now. Or if we weren't being hypervigilant and having security at all of our Jewish institutions and all of these things, like there are people literally on the streets chanting for our death and our destruction. So I can't help but feel my Jewishness right now is the most prominent thing, because I'm feeling the pain and I'm feeling that existential crisis with the rest of the Jewish people.
Okay, thank you. And Leah, again, I'm going to repeat it for our audience. Through what lens did you primarily identify and see yourself a month ago, 3 weeks ago versus today?
So thank you, Tabby, for the introduction, and thank you for Hadassah for having me here, and for everybody that's listening. So I wear all 3 hats, and I'm sure Amy and I'm sure Tabby, you feel the same way. Depends on what side of the bed you wake up, or which audience you're speaking to. It really depends which hat you have on. And I want to preface that I just came back yesterday from Israel after working 2 weeks on the ground with thousands of foreign journalists. And my perspective, I think, is I don't want to say unique, but I think that it really drove a lot of things home. particularly if in my professional work and as a Zionist Latina Jew. I think that before October 7th, the primary hat I wore, at least in my professional life, is the person of color, the Hispanic hat, because I speak to non-Jewish Latinos, Latino journalists and influencers, media professionals all day long. And being a Jew, unfortunately, in America and in Latin America, labels me as white. And so by saying that I'm Hispanic, it affords me to have the door a little bit wide open to be able to go in and have the conversations about how Israel's covered, inviting journalists to Israel, and the difficult challenge of getting media, regardless of the language, to cover anti-Semitism today. But when October 7th happened, the Jewish Zionist hat, I think, came to the forefront because the spotlight got turned on us in a way that I don't think that we ever imagined that it would. And I think that with what we're seeing, particularly in the United States and Europe, and we will see in other parts of the world happening right now, I think that we have to first and foremost be proud of who we are, come together as a united force to face the hate and the atrocities that we're seeing. And I think that like in everything that we do, you know, being an Asian, being a Hispanic, it comes out as part of our Jewishness. I don't think that it's something that will ever be divorced from who we are. But I think that after October 7th, whereas I typically like to enter the door with my Hispanic foot, I'm now proudly, more than ever, stepping in with my Zionist Jewish foot.
Amazing. Thank you both. Please compare for us, give us a sense of this, of being a person of color in the Zionist world first, being a Jew of color in the Jewish world, and then being a Zionist in the Asian and Hispanic community. Give us a sense into what that's like for you.
Multicultural, I would say. I know for me in Israel, I'm Israeli, right? I'm not, we mix as part of the melting pot of what is the beauty of Israel. You know, when I speak Hebrew, my Spanish accent comes out, and, you know, then I'm speaking Spanish and Hebrewish and everything in between. In America, as a Jew, amongst non-Jewish Hispanics, I'm white. And as a Hispanic in the Jewish community, I'm seen as a person of color. So, you know, it's more here in the Western Hemisphere that you kind of feel a bit apart. Whereas in Israel, I think it's the differences that are more a unifier than an identifier, at least in my opinion.
Okay. How about you, Amy?
Yeah, I would say it's very different depending on what kind of community you're in. For example, I'm in the Bay Area where there tends to be a lot of, I don't even like to use the word left wing, but like very left wing politics in the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community. So things like being a Zionist are not as popular, I guess you could say, to put it lightly.
That's very diplomatic,
which is a challenge that that I've always found, but I'm especially finding right now in this current situation. I'd say my experience going back and forth from an Asian community to a Jewish community is that when I'm in the Jewish community, I always feel more Asian because I'm one of few. And when I'm in the Asian community as a Jew, I feel more Jewish because I'm one of few. And so it's an interesting thing how when we're in one or the other, because, you know, when I'm around Asians that don't know a lot about Jewish people, I am the one who knows all the things about Jewish people because I'm Jewish. And I become this sort of representative. And on the other side of that, when I'm in a Jewish community where there aren't many Asian people, I'm finding that they're looking to me for, you know, who are Asian people. And it's also interesting because especially in America, you know, there is that assumption or that stereotype of the white presenting Ashkenazi Jewish person, and I'm not that. You know, I don't appear as a white person, and so there's always that initial in communities where I'm not known. There, you know, there's often that initial questioning of like, who are you? Why are you here? And it can be uncomfortable. But something that I've been learning since October 7th is that although I have faced, you know, awkward or uncomfortable or sometimes even disrespectful, you know, maybe comments or questioning in the Jewish community at times, it's not the same as what I'm facing from what I'm seeing from and what I'm hearing from and what I'm being told from my Asian peers right now about being, you know, about being a Zionist or being a Jew, and being told that I'm, you know, supporting the wrong side and not recognizing that Asian Jews exist and that we, you know, how we might be feeling about what's going on.
Yeah, I think both of you carry such a heavy burden, right? In the sense that, like all of us, none of us ever signed up to really be an ambassador, right, for anything. And yet, right now, when people are finding out, you know, that you're Jewish and that you're Zionist, they sort of demand answers, right? And it puts us all in a position to then educate ourselves, because the worst position we could be in is somebody sees us as an ambassador of Israel and Judaism, let's say, whether we want to be or not. And the worst thing that can happen, honestly, is that we don't have any answers, right? Or that we don't exude any pride. Before I move on to my next question, I want to tell you that, you know, growing up in Iran, I was only surrounded by Iranians and my family members. And so the only Jews that I knew were my family members in the community, and people in the synagogue were dark-haired, dark-skinned, had Persian name, first names, Persian last names. And then when I came out here to the West, it was my first time ever meeting Ashkenazi Jews. And so it was this reverse learning, right? Whereas now I'm here in LA, it's called Tehrangeles because it's the largest Iranian diaspora community in the world. But if you took me out on a speaking tour, let's say of Kansas, very few people there would even know that Jews exist in Iran. And if I met Ashkenazim throughout the country, as I usually do, sometimes I'm their first Iranian Jew that they've met. And it's funny to me because when I was a kid, they were my first Ashkenazim that I had ever met. When I was a kid, I thought all Jews looked like me and my family. I want to ask you both, where do you get the most pushback from in your daily life? Are there specific communities? And by the way, Amy, especially given what you do, I expect even virtual communities, physical communities, right? Leah, I can also imagine based on your work that there's pushback and people making your life harder who actually represent regimes in Latin American countries. But I really want to know, where are you getting the most pushback from?
So when you work in media, you get it from all sides. You know, speaking of Iran, some of our biggest adversaries in media, spreading some of the most atrocious disinformation are state-sponsored media outlets. And I'm sorry to say, but Tehran is spending a lot of money in Spanish to communicate with Hispanics throughout Spain, the US, and Latin America. We also have anti-Zionist regimes in Latin America. We just saw a few days ago, the president of Colombia came out and basically blamed Israel for what had happened. And the ties have recently been severed between Colombia and Israel, and they have been allies for decades, since the founding of the State of Israel. So we see pushback at the political, at the media, and even at the community levels. But we also see a bit of resistance sometimes, you know, within our own community, because Hispanics are seen as influential or the potential to have influence. But the realization of communicating with them is not always at the forefront. And so where I spend my day trying to educate our own community about the lack of communication and the need to communicate, because Iran and other state-funded actors and other extremist groups are all dominating our narrative, and we, the Jewish people and Israel, are not. It's sometimes a challenge for me to even do my job, because it's not seen as much as a priority, let's say, as other programming. And so from every which way within the media, but I will say this, within the non-Jewish Hispanic community, we have a lot of allies, and for that, I'm very thankful to get up every morning and do my job and know that the glass is half full. But if we don't start communicating better to the Hispanic non-Jewish community, the water is receding. And that is what I spend every single day, weekends, holidays, fighting for, because as we see right now, what's happening in the world around us, some of the allies that we had in the past are not standing with us right now. And so we need to hold on to the allies that we have and strengthen those relationships now more than ever.
And let's not forget, Hezbollah has its own channel in Latin America, the Al-Manar channel. Here you turn on CNN or you watch a reality show, and over there you can watch the Hezbollah station, right? Unbelievable.
I didn't want to take up the entire time of the panel
No,
listing
don't worry.
all of the Israel enemies that have communications outlets in Spanish. So I just kept it brief, but everybody has Spanish language outlets, with the exception really of us. So yes.
Wow. How about you, Amy?
So I spend a lot of my time, and most of the activity I'm doing is on social media, which is equally challenging in a different way, I would say. People on social media can be very nasty in ways that they might not be in the real world. And in the media, there are hypothetically, standards of journalism and these kinds of things that don't exist on social media. I honestly get pushback from probably everywhere. For a right-wing person, I'm too left-wing, and for a left-wing person, I'm too right-wing. Lately, in this current, well, actually, I saw this in May of 2021 as well, when we had our last escalation, and then in this current war, I'm seeing a lot of the Asian activist accounts that I followed during, the waves of rising Asian hate during COVID, communities that I sought comfort in and support in are now posting about how, as Asian people, we must clearly be on the side of the Palestinians, posting things that are even sympathizing with the terrorists, not addressing the loss of life on the Israeli side, and not addressing, the hostage crisis either. And for me, that's been very disheartening. I do try to engage with some of them, but a lot of them, it's, the similar pushback that you get from any other anti-Israel person. But I will say, even though from these, independent activist accounts, or maybe they're small organizations, there is a lot of, as far as, in the mainstream or political support, there are Asian representatives in the government. One such is Doris Matsui of Sacramento, which is where I grew up. She has come out unequivocally supporting, Israel's right to exist, to defend itself. She's always voted this way on Israel. So it's hard to really measure what the Asian community thinks about this. Like I said, I'm finding a lot of pushback from Bay Area Jewish community, because there are a lot of anti-Zionist Jews in the Bay Area, apparently. And so I'm seeing some of that pushback. But I just think that everyone in the echo chamber of social media is yelling at everyone. So I'm getting a lot of noise from everyone.
I really want to take a minute to say that I hope our audience appreciates as much as I do the battles that Leah and Amy are fighting. Even when you describe them, I want to reach for a bottle of Xanax, because I'm not sure that I could do what you do all day. And as Leah said, weekends, holidays, right? There is no after work for you. All of it, your whole day is filled up with this. You truly are, both of you, exemplary woman, Eshet Chayil. And I'm so grateful. It sounds like I'm wrapping up, but I'm not. But I'm just so grateful again to Hadassah for having initiated this and for having, brought you on board to speak. I want to ask you both, why have you chosen to affiliate and to be a Zionist? And Amy, you go ahead and start, please, for that one.
Sure. I don't know that I can say it's a choice, honestly. As a Jewish person, to me, Zionism, having our homeland and it's ancient. It's part of our ancient culture. It's part of our ancient religion. It's inherent, in my opinion, to part of being a Jew. And that was only amplified when I started to visit Israel, right? So I've said it many times, and this is the hill I will die on. I think being an anti-Zionist Jew is a privileged viewpoint.
Wow.
Even if someone is Jewish and they personally have not, and they've been lucky enough not to be affected by anti-Semitism, and their family has been lucky enough not to need to have a place to go to exist as being a Jew, that's great for you, but that's a privileged viewpoint. And millions of people in our Jewish community literally need Israel. They would not be alive. And I would even claim that perhaps the Jewish people would have already been extinct if it was not for the modern state of Israel. So I don't know that we even have a choice. It's like, to me, it's like, be a Zionist and support this safe haven for Jewish people who need it, which is millions of Jews around the world, which is most of our population, right? Because there are only a few million of us, or we will cease to exist, and that includes me. So to me, it's not a choice.
I love that, Amy. I don't think I've ever heard that before. And I think you have an amazing op-ed there. If you ever want to write one, send it to me, get it published. It actually reminds me of the Jewish community in Iran right now. Iran is home to the largest population of Jews in the Middle East after Israel, but they don't dare to be Zionist because Zionism is a crime punishable by death. It's a capital offense in Iran after the 1979 revolution. So Iranian Jews are actually sort of paraded out in the streets during anti-Israel protests, and they wouldn't even dare view one pro-Israel sentiment or in public at least. And how sad, and you're right, how privileged Jews are, especially here in the West, that they can really go out and bash Israel, whereas you have Jewish communities in places like Iran, and I have the photos to back this up, where the Jews are paraded around at anti-Israel rallies holding signs against Israel that they don't believe, with paramilitia gunmen behind them, right? You're right. It's truly a privilege to be an anti-Israel Jew. Leah, I'd love to hear your response to this as well.
So I think Amy's actually onto something. I want to piggyback off what she said, because I think it's really, I don't know if it's a uniquely American phenomenon, but it's something that you don't really see in Latin America. I'm not certain if you even see it in Europe, and sure is not in Iran, right? Where when you live outside of the United States, Israel is your safe space, because of not only the persecution, the insecurity that exists outside of Israel. And for whatever reason, for certain American Jews, they don't feel that sense of insecurity. But I can tell you that there are a lot of us in America today that have that sense. And so for me, Zionism is absolutely not a choice. Like it was part of my DNA. And
as we can tell by the Ben Gurion picture in the back.
I mean, it's who I am. You can't divorce it from me, and it drives everything that I do. I never in a million years that I would be explaining Israel to millions of non-Hispanic Jews through the top Spanish language outlets in the world. But I guess, the Zionism that I had within me, awoke at some point, and I made a career out of it. And I'm so thankful that this is what I do every single day is I defend Israel and the Jewish people, explain and educate to millions of non-Jews around the world. And for me, it's a privilege, a total privilege.
Amazing. Chazak. Has there been an increase in empathy for Jews in the Asian communities and the Hispanic communities? Because sadly, we know nationals, from both communities have been victims of the Hamas massacres and the kidnappings, the brutalities.
I think going back to what I said before, we need to look at who our allies are, and we do in the Spanish-speaking world, from Latin America to Spain and across the United States and the U.S. Hispanic community. We have allies. Those that are not our friends are unfortunately the ones a lot of the time that are getting all of the attention and the publicity. But I can tell you through my daily work. And even in the case of Colombia, when the president said what he said, and Israel immediately severed ties, we had journalists in Colombia that called us up and said to us, "You have friends here."
Wow.
So we have to put things into proportion in terms of, there is sympathy, and it's because they're either, it's fueled by religious faith, but it's also by the millions of people throughout the Hispanic world, journalists, politicians, educators that have visited Israel over decades through a variety of different organizations. And for each and every one, for anybody that brings delegations to Israel, like I do, you see a transformation in any individual when they experience Israel for themselves. And like, that's a return on investment. And those people, I can tell you, they stand with Israel today, and they sympathize with Israel today. And those are the allies that we need to lean on right now, and that we need to be engaging and strengthening those relationships with. I think that there are some that aren't. I think that we're seeing within the Hispanic community that there are some anti-Zionist vocal voices out there. I'm not going to name names, but they're there, and I think that we give them more attention than they deserve. And it's our attention that is fueling their popularity, and not because of their own comments, which I'm not even certain they really know what they're talking about half of the time when it comes to Israel. We're the ones that are giving them more attention than is due.
Okay, thank you for that. And Amy?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this earlier, that although I am seeing a lot of, these Asian activist accounts and organizations speaking in support of Palestine or Palestinians and not speaking on Jews, for every one of those posts I see, or for every anti-Zionist Asian Jew that I get a comment or a message from, I have equal numbers or more from other Asian Jews who have found my social media account and feel, comfort in knowing that not all Asians or Asian Jews feel that way. As far as countries in the world, I'm not really involved with a lot of political or, that kind of area, but I do know from some Chinese friends that are in China that unfortunately, one of the hostages who was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, she is half Chinese. Her mother is Chinese. She's from China. And they have been mocking her on the news and in the media there. They are very unsympathetic to her. But then I also, see that in Japan, there are rallies in, pro-Israel rallies.
That's
happening.
right.
So
That's right.
It's really, dependent on the country, on the community. And as I said before, there are plenty of Asian politicians in the government in America who are unequivocally, standing with Israel and speaking out for Israel. And I think, at least in the Bay Area, that's largely due to the hard work that JCRCs are doing here. So, we do have allies in the Asian community, and not everyone is anti-Zionist.
I think, Amy, if you want to ever write about the young woman who's being held captive and is being mocked back in China, that's your second op-ed.
Okay.
Because
work on it.
very few people would know about that. We're gonna do some closing remarks, and I want to ask each one of you, what do you want the broader community to know about your experience? Right? Give us a tour. Give us a glimpse into the world of being Amy and Leah. What do you want the broader community to know about your experience? Leah, do you want to start?
Where do I start? I'm still reeling from my last 2 weeks on the ground in Israel, and just what I experienced there on the ground with the media. I'm proud to say that I was with the #1 U.S. Hispanic journalist in the Spanish-speaking world. I won't say the name, but kind of like our Anderson Cooper in the Spanish-speaking world. Had him interview survivors of the October 7th atrocities, Argentinian couple, an elderly Argentinian couple, were being treated at Hadassah Hospital. And I accompanied him and his camera crew to interview them, to talk about how they survived. They were taken out of their homes. They tried to keep their shelter closed, and they were shot in the hands when the terrorists started just indiscriminately shooting at their shelter door. They were taken hostage. They were taken to the border of Gaza. And the husband, who we worked with for many, many years, Spanish speakers from Argentina, said to the terrorists, "Nope, not going any further. Not going into Gaza." And the terrorists got scared for whatever reason, and he decided to run back into Gaza. The elderly couple turned around and thought they were going to be shot in the back of the head, and they were able to escape and walk back to their home. And now they're being treated at Hadassah near Mount Scopus. And so I was able to bring this very, very, very influential, very important journalist that speaks to millions of Hispanics in the United States.
That's amazing.
To do that interview. That's just like a sliver of the work that I do on a daily basis, and the importance of telling all of these stories, not just the tragedies, but those of survival and those of heroism, particularly during these times. And my experience, that's just one of my experiences. My experience is telling the Jewish and the Israel story. And my experience is just trying to ensure that we're breaking down barriers through these stories, and building up positive perceptions, which will ensure the security and survival of Israel and the Jewish people in the long term.
Amazing. Leah, I hope you write about that, or let me write about that. Somebody has to tell the story of that couple. That is amazing. I want to also let our viewers know, before Amy responds to my question, please, that we are doing viewer Q&A, and I have some viewer Q&A for you, questions for you guys already. So, Amy, what would you like broader audiences to know?
Sure. I think for the world as a whole, Asian Jews exist. That's something that I am so surprised to find out every day. Another person that just doesn't know that we exist, which I guess just comes from a lot of not knowing about the Jewish people, or considering that our diaspora is truly global. So that's the first thing. And then I would say one thing that I want the Asian community who holds anti-Zionist views to understand how existential this situation is for Jews and how anti-Semitism is, as much as I'm afraid or feel unsafe sometimes for being Asian and facing Asian hate, I'm not afraid that Asians will cease to exist. But as a Jew facing anti-Semitism, I understand that behind that anti-Semitism is truly people. I mean, hello, we're facing Hamas, whose sole stated purpose in their own documents is to kill all the Jews in Israel and in the world. So
Yeah.
that existential threat that we face, and that's why, we are Zionist, or I am a Zionist. And
Can I stop you for a second, Amy, and ask you?
Sure.
Do you think you would have come to that realization if you hadn't moved to Israel in 2015? Do you feel like sometimes you have to be on the ground in the Middle East and not in America to really get what you said?
No, because I started advocating for Israel before I had been there. Of course, I was very nervous once I was going there, and I was like, well, people have been telling me all these bad things about Israel. Like, what if they're right? I had that thought in my mind, but I went there and I found out that they were not only wrong, but they were so wrong. And so that's what eventually led me to lead Aliyah, which is like a whole panel in of itself. But, I just think people don't understand this. And a lot of the, arguments that I get in through messages with detractors online is they're like, you keep coming back to this anti-Semitism. This is not about anti-Semitism. Israel's an occupier, all these things. Israel is powerful. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is about anti-Semitism. Like, we have gotten to where we are because of anti-Semitism. We need Israel to exist because of anti-Semitism. And I don't think people understand like just how true the existential threat is to Jewish people. Like, we could truly be wiped off the earth, and that's why we sometimes unfortunately have to do what we're doing, because it's either do this or not exist, and I don't think people understand that.
Amazing. Also, please tell viewers where they can get that necklace.
This necklace is from Daniela Yablonka, I think her name is Daniela Blanc. I don't remember.
It's okay. It's I'm
putting
putting you on
Instagram
the
and I'll
spot.
post it.
I'm putting you on the spot because it's a beautiful Israel map necklace.
It's new. I just got it. I have like a very wide collection of Judaica.
I love it. I want to tackle a viewer question for the both of you. This person said the comment, I think being an anti-Zionist Jew is privileged, as Amy said, is so key. That's something needing to be shared convincingly. How can we do this?
Well, I mean, anyone can say this. Like, don't, you can quote me or not quote me, but like, you can just explain that to someone, that just because you or your family or someone's Jewish family didn't need a place like Israel to exist as a Jewish person, that is not the case for millions of Jews. The ones who live in Israel, and even those who are now considering to move to Israel because of the anti-Semitism that they're facing in other places. And there's plenty of evidence to back this up, right? Like, you can ask the Arab world, where are your Jews? They're in Israel or they're dead. So, and if you want a tactical way to share it, I have a reel on my Instagram. You can follow me and you can share it with your audience on Instagram.
Okay, tell everyone how to find you on Instagram.
My Instagram is at the Amy Albertson. The Amy AMY, Albertson ALBERTSON. I don't know if someone can write that in the chat.
Maybe our admins can. And Leah, do you how would you like viewers to follow you?
So if you speak Spanish, anybody who does speak Spanish, you can follow our Fuente Latina account that is specifically geared for non-Jewish audiences at Fuente Latina. And we also have a bilingual digital brand that is communicating about Jewish identity and anti-Semitism to under 30 US Latinos in Spanglish, a mix of Spanish and English, and that's Activista Media.
Okay, amazing. We have another viewer question. The city of Richmond, California, you may have heard about this, just had a 5-hour hearing on Tuesday night and adopted a resolution about Palestinians in support The viewer wants to know, was that anti-Semitic? It says, was that anti-Semitic to the eyes of the speaker? I'm assuming it means maybe did our speaker, do our panelists believe that was anti-Semitic? Any thoughts you have in general on Richmond City Council's 5-hour devotion to?
I'm assuming that's directed at me because I live in the Bay Area and Richmond, California is in the Bay Area. So do I think that was anti-Semitic? I will admit that I don't know that I didn't read the details of the adopted resolution. So like language wise, I couldn't tell you exactly. But I would probably say that based on the track record of communities in the Bay Area and the context of the situation we are in right now, it probably was anti-Semitic. I highly doubt that it spoke at all about Israeli loss of life or took into account any of the atrocities that happened on October 7th. And, deciding that your city in the Bay Area needs to adopt a resolution in support of the Palestinian people in the current context of what's happening right now, to me, seems anti-Semitic, unless you are also adopting a resolution supporting Israel's right to exist and defend itself after the attacks of October 7th.
Okay. Leah, do you have any thoughts or?
So I only read the headline. I didn't get a chance to listen to what can I imagine is a very sad discourse with little research or facts based on it. But I will say this, from what I could tell, I think it is symptomatic of what we're also seeing regarding the ethnic studies movement in California. And it begs a bigger question as to what exactly is happening on these city council boards that we are seeing have a majority of Hispanic members. And it goes back to the necessity, again, of communicating outside of our community and finding ways to educate those, particularly in positions of city councils and politicians, whether it's through relationships, through the media, or at grassroots level. We need to be focusing and strategizing on how best to engage some of these members. And I saw that there was another question about, do you try to talk to those that are anti-Israel? And I think that also bleeds into the whole issue of these city councils and ethnic studies, is that we have to pick our battles, as we can clearly see what we're facing right now. Those that hate us are not going to change their minds. Let's be clear. We all saw that. We saw that, I think the clearest example was of what happened with the hospital in Gaza, and how the media just went with copying with whatever was coming out of Gaza without any second sourcing, just copying one after the other. Major outlets kept headlines that refuted the evidence that was proven that it wasn't Israel. We have a particular challenge ahead of us. And I think that trying to even engage those that don't like us is a colossal waste of time. I think that there is a very large majority that don't know us and would like to get to know us. We are just not engaging them. And I think that we need to be focusing our efforts now more than ever on that large majority.
Is it, Leah, that we also, just as such a small community, really don't have the manpower of resources, let's say? I mean, if you think about it, there's one amazing Leah Soibel, and how many Spanish-speaking countries, right?
It's not Spanish, it's also English. It's not a lack of manpower. We as a Jewish community, because of the evil around us and the danger that we face, we fear a lot. We don't want to communicate to non-Jews. We fear that communicating with non-Jews will expose us and put us in danger. And in not communicating, we're allowing Israel's enemies and our enemies to communicate for us. And that's precisely what we're starting to see at these levels, whether it's in the media or in the case of the city council, ethnic studies, and elsewhere. And so it really does behoove Jews here in the United States, to find ways, and we're working with a lot of different communities and leaders to be able to learn how to communicate in a way that resonates with the non-Jewish community about our issues and about Israel.
Let me ask
Yeah,
both of you, does your work ever cross into the realm of college campuses?
Not yet. We understand that there's very much a need, and there are incredible organizations working there. So we're not trying to redouble the efforts of other organizations, but we do assist when we can with communication strategies.
Okay, Amy.
Yeah, it's both to address your question and the question of the viewer, and to kind of double down on what Leah said. So I actually started as a campus activist. My Israel advocacy started on campus and then moved to online as I left campus. But
and it should be said, not at an easy place in Portland.
Yeah, in Portland, which was very challenging. But I will say this, one of the first, so to kind of reiterate what Leah was saying about where we put our efforts, one of the first most basic rules I learned through advocacy training as a college student was the 80-20 rule, right? So there's 20% of people 10% that are totally with us and 10% that totally hate us. We're not here to talk to those people. The 10% of people that totally hate us, you're not going to convince them not to hate us. Don't spend your time on them. It's those 80% people in the middle who, like Leah said, maybe don't know us or unsure, and they don't know. And so those are the people that you will be able to reach, and most of the time are susceptible to truth. And you just, I guess it's like a race to reach them personally. And one thing that happened while I was at Portland State University as a student leader was I founded the first Israel group. So we brought positive, proactive Israel programming to our campus. And although I went through a lot of harassment and we went through a lot of anti-Israel activity on the campus, over the years of starting that group and having that presence on campus, the group has now grown. I'm really happy to say that in the last years, the pro-Israel group and the Hillel have grown immensely. They have much better relationships with the student government of the university and with the faculty and the administration of the university. And the picture looks very different than it did when I was there. So it is possible. But yeah, to kind of echo what Leah was saying, like, it's not worth your time to argue with someone who just is like, they're not going to be convinced. You want to spend the time on those who are teachable, those who are open to learning, those who are open to hearing.
I hope the pro-Israel group in Portland had you back as a speaker.
Yeah, I spoke at their annual fundraiser. I did.
And Amy, do you in your work also hear from students? It's their generation that's so active on social media,
Yeah, so I've actually spoken to a lot more high schoolers and middle schoolers, but I do sometimes also speak with college campuses. And yeah, what's happening now on college campuses is atrocious and very scary. And I feel I have a lot of sympathy for those on college campuses.
Yeah, we have another viewer question, and it goes into campuses too. It says, will there be a quote unquote blackout day where Jewish people who support Israel walk out of work or walk out of school? I think with enough planning, it could have a strong effect and send a good message. What do you guys think?
It's been a long time since I've been on a campus. But I think that the unifying force that we're starting to see in terms of university administrations that are taking a stance for one side over another, and philanthropists taking their money and walking, is sending a very strong message. And I think if we continue to see these types of acts of support from within the community, standing up once and for all and saying enough is enough, I think it will have a ripple effect, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure personally that the tactic of a blackout day of walking out is really an effective tool. It doesn't teach anyone anything, and I'm not sure that on college campuses we have the numbers to make that effect.
That's right.
Unfortunately, I don't think people hop on the Israel bandwagon the way they hop on the Palestinian bandwagon. I saw a video, I forget which campus it was. It honestly doesn't even matter at this point, but a professor was, talking to the people at the rally, and he said, some of you may be here because you just didn't want to go to class, and some of you may be here because you just love a good rally. And it's like, yeah, people will just go to these anti-Israel rallies for those reasons, but they, it's
Don't
much more
forget,
risky.
sometimes they assign extra credit too.
Yes, or they're getting extra credit. And it's also a lot more risky to identify yourself as a Zionist on a college campus. You do risk things like harassment and possibly even violence. So I'm
That's
just
right.
not sure that's the best tactic for us at
That's
this
right.
point.
I saw a video last night, I forget which campus, but as you said, it doesn't matter, of Jewish students locking themselves in a bathroom on campus
Cooper Union.
because they were so afraid of the pro-Hamas supporters pounding outside.
It was actually
Yeah,
the campus security that locked them into the library, and it took the police 40 minutes to decide to intervene for them, which is also a huge problem on college campuses, that they are not protecting Jewish students.
That's really unbelievable. I can sort of, if I imagine a day of Jewish student walk out on a campus, pathetically, they would need so much security just to even do that. I can imagine, between 10 to 100 students walking out of their classrooms, but twice as many security guards around them on both sides. I want you guys to end with this, and I have a question for both of you, and this is from me. And that is that sometimes I wish I could just go back to October 6th and have it like Groundhog Day, the movie, where I almost wouldn't mind every day waking up and it's again Friday, October 6th. I don't really remember what I did that day. I probably ran errands and cooked for Shabbat and was preparing for Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. But I think there's a part of Jews around the world that just wish they could rewind the clock and go back 3 weeks or a month and just kind of stay in that time period. And my question for you is, with all of our heartbreak, with all of how raw this feels, with the anxiety, with the fact that we can't sleep at night, we can't focus at work, which is exactly, we know what Hamas wants, by the way. Can you guys leave our viewers with something that you've either heard or you've sort of thought of yourselves that is helping you get through your days, that is giving you a sense of relief, healing, maybe even, dare I say, normalcy, whatever it is, because I think it's very important to end on that note. We're all in this cat-like state of existential anxiety, something that I think, honestly, I didn't think my generation would ever experience.
So I have two kind of anecdotes that help me continue doing whatever it is I'm doing. In October 6th, I was in Morocco with a journalist doing interviews about normalization. And the next day, October 7th, I was due to fly with these top journalists to Israel.
Wow.
Where we were supposed to be attending a conference in Tel Aviv on normalization. And within an hour of hearing about the attacks, I had to cancel the entire trip. And I was advised that as an Israeli, I was in danger of staying in Morocco. Having been on the ground the last 2 weeks in Israel, I want to share with everybody here what I saw, which is, I think, a very positive outcome of the horrible, horrible tragedy that we are all experiencing collectively. And that is, with everything that we see in the news and everything that we're seeing on social media, I think that it's actually strengthening and uniting our community as a whole. On the ground in Israel, I was working with volunteers that I used to work with 15 years ago in different profit communication organizations. I was working with old colleagues. I was working with other organizations that in peacetime or non-conflict time, you know, you cooperate, but you know, there's competition, right? So, but on the ground in Israel, three-letter acronym organizations no longer existed. There were no lines in the sandbox as to this is your territory or my territory. And you see everybody, and even people, you know, colleagues that, you know, maybe frenemies, all that's gone. All that's dissolved. Whatever was before October 7th doesn't exist after October 7th. And everybody, I mean, everybody is working together to do whatever they can in their own way as professionals or as individuals to help us collectively as Israelis and Jews get through this. And that, what I saw on the ground, despite the rockets, despite the terror, despite the horrors, is a saving grace that this incident of October 7th is actually uniting us and will make us stronger for the future.
Thank you, Leah. You made me feel like I'm back in Israel, which is exactly, it's healing is what it is. Thank you. How about you, Amy? What is getting you through the day?
I think it's very similar to what Leah said. You know, a very core value and tenet of being a Jew is our community. And right now I'm just clinging to that community. And, you know, the stress, the anxiety, the sadness, all of these emotions are extremely heightened at this time. And I don't have a lot of energy for the detractors or anyone who is not on board, you know? So I'm really just clinging to all of those who are, and I get immense support from other Jews, you know, that follow me, and it's really, you know, on one level, I am on social media to try to educate those who don't know about Israel, who might hold, you know, I say brainwashed views from propaganda or things like this. But what I'm really finding is that although I may not be able to convince any of those people of anything right now, what I have been able to do is provide comfort and support and empowerment to other Jews. And so for me, that's really what it's all about. And, you know, just kind of instilling that strength in others in my Jewish community and feeling that back. And so it's really about clinging to that Jewish community right now that's getting me through this.
I think you stumbled on the secret to what kept Jews going for so many millennia. Just go back to your community. That's where it is. Your home, your family, your community. Thank you. Thank you both.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Amy, Leah, and Tabby for that conversation. And I'm glad we ended on a hopeful note. We got to a lot of heavy topics there, and I think it was extremely informative. I'm actually lucky. I've worked with Amy before, and I was housemates with Leah at a Jewish professionals retreat this summer. And I'm so moved by the passion they bring to their work. And Tabby, amazing moderating there. And I see we have had so much interest from the audience, which is great. You know, I was thinking about something that Leah said. You know, so much of Leah and Amy's work is informed by their identities, but there are so many ways in which their identities are sort of not held against them, but used as part of how people see them, right? You know, Leah said that her Jewishness makes her white in some circles, and her, you know, being Hispanic in the Jewish community makes her a person of color. And, you know, Amy saying she's seen as more Asian within Jewish contexts and more Jewish within Asian contexts. And I think it's important for us to remember how we're treating each other and how we're seeing each other within our own community, because it's just important for us to be treating people fully and with respect. And, you know, Tabby, how you said the burden that is sort of on people of color to explain themselves in Jewish scenarios and explain Jewishness to other people. I think it's really important for us to remember that people aren't ambassadors, we are people. And so I think that we all learned a lot from that. So thank you all so much. I also have to say, you know, hearing about Leah's work with Fuente Latina, it's kind of terrifying that Iran is making a push in the Spanish-speaking media world, that Hezbollah has Spanish-speaking media outlets. And we're just so grateful to you, Leah, for the work you're doing. And Amy, I want all those op-eds. So so please get to work.